everybody, and welcome to our fifth webinar on behalf of Color in Knitwear for today. So we started to create a small webinar series on topics that might be interesting for knitwear designers, people design fabrics in any kind of ways. So we started that webinar series like half a year ago, and we try every 6 weeks to start a new webinar. So if you think one topic is very important and needs to be covered, we are always open for your suggestions. I'm here with my colleague Rosina today from
Hi,
Forn.
everyone.
She supports me with your questions and with everything. I will lead through the presentation that will take about half an hour, I think, 40 minutes maybe, and then we'll have some time left for questions and yeah, whatever comes to your mind can be answered. There's enough time left then. So, okay, let's start today with our Shift MICROFACTOry presentation on color in knitwear. And why are we doing this? Is that many designers reached out to us, and they do ask us for, or they are like very insecure about using color in knitwear because mostly they think it's very complicated to program. It's like very expensive. It has like it slows down the processes. So many designers stick to one color because it's just simply easier, but there are very easy and simple ways to implement color. So we thought that might be a nice topic to go through all the stages of implementing color in your knitwear and yeah, bringing it into direction how you can implement it in the future, that it's not such a big task in the future. Today we go through some topics like trims and color blocking, Jacquard patterns, Intarsia, and then we suggest a framework how you can make your decision, how you can build up the decision to have the right to make the right choices. And in the end, I will inform you about the Shift workshops for everybody who will stay until the end. There are some very nice offers this time. And we have a question and answer round, as I promised in the last minutes. So let's get started. So, how do we use color in our knitwear designs? First, uh, we need to know some things in advance before we can start designing. So if we have a knitwear piece, some things are very essential to know. One of them is which yarn do I use and what is my design. But on the other hand, it helps really to know which machine you are using. So if you ask your production company, what is the machine? And then especially how many yarn feeders do you have? Because for us, color is not like in print. Color is like something which you place on top of something. It's like a cover of fabric. But in knitwear, color means a specific yarn. So in knitwear, every color is one cone of yarn, which needs to go into the machine through a yarn feeder. So usually the yarn feeders define how many colors you can use. Like a very modern machine usually has up to 36 yarn feeders. And but some of them are used also for technical yarns, so like the waist thread or the comb thread. So some of them needs to be taken into account as essential yarns where you cannot play around with, but most normal is like 12 color yarn feeders you can really use. But make this sure with your production company in advance. Yarn feeders are very important. Next one is also your knitting structure, which you are using, because all knitting structures allows different kind of color implementation. For some, it's very easy, and we will talk about this afterwards. But for some, it might already be very difficult, might not achieve the result you want to have. So the knitting structure you choose for your garment is also very important, and you need to know how you can implement color within your specific knitting structure. So when we start with knitwear, the most easy way to implement color into your knitwear piece is to use trims. Because trims most oftenly already feeded with different yarn feeders. For example, with a normal sweater, trims are mostly using 2 threads of yarn, 2 plies, and the whole sweater then use one ply. So it changes already the yarn feeder when you knit the cuff of your sweater. So you can easily just add another color to the yarn feeder there. It gives you the possibility of very easily playing around with colors. So for this, you need to know which elements you can play with. And this for us in the knitwear branch, we always think about we talk about the trims, which means the collar and the cuffs and the wrist, the what is it? No, yeah, the main trim on the body, and we have the sleeves, which are then connected to the front and the back part. So each part, which you see here, can be used for different color settings that you can play around with it easily. So use different colors for the sleeves and for the trims, for the collar and for your main part. And you get a very easy approach to use color. The same with cardigans, and you need to know that for these kind of effects, no programming is needed or very little programming. So you just have to assign a different yarn feeder to your knitwear program. So this almost doesn't cost anything, and there is no limitations in the programming. Very easy step. Then the next step of using trims or using different yarn feeders without changing the program is color blocking, actually, that you divide your pieces, the flat pieces into parts. So, and here it's very important that you always think horizontally, because the knitting machine knits in rows. So it's very important that you know you only can change color after one knitted complete finished row. So then you start a new line, and this is also very easy to implement. And color blocking then is the the most basic level of stripes. So with stripes, we are one stage ahead. If we want to add stripes in the garment, that's the same as color blocking. You need to wait until your system goes backwards and forwards and backwards. That means one stripe has a minimum of 2 rows, which is the thinnest stripe you can make in your garment. 2 rows of loops, but it allows you different kind of stripes. So you can have like very thin ones combined with thicker ones, but you need to know the stitch density, so the amount of rows within a certain tension. So you need to count your knitwear piece, and then after this you can program the rows, and it always needs to be an even number. But you can also implement different colors in a row, so different rows with different colors, because then for every step you can easily use another yarn feeder. You also have vertical stripes. They are a bit more complex, but very easy to apply in specific kind of knitting patterns. Here you see the full cardigan on the left, the orange one, and the flow jacquard on the right. So with these techniques, you can very easily make vertical stripes. If you plan it differently, if you want different knitting techniques, so because these techniques play around with the front and the back anyway, and so you can use it to change your color. But if you want to um, in, have a different pattern, a vertical pattern, then you easily come to Jacquard, to Intarsia. So for this, that is a very easy way to play around with this. But if you want a more sophisticated, differently wider stripes, then it becomes much more difficult. So, but for this one, float jacquard and full cardigan, it's very easy. Then we come already to the jacquard patterns. So we have many different kinds of jacquard patterns. I will talk about three different today, which is the flow jacquard, the net jacquard, and the twill jacquard. And I will explain you the difference. Because jacquard for most of the people is like playing around with patterns, and then I have a jacquard structure, but it's good to know the difference between it. So for the flow jacquard, we have two or more colors which work simultaneously. So you knit in the front, you knit only in the front, and the two colors, the colors which are not knitted, are running as floats on the back. That means also, because floats are just loose threads, and it might be very difficult if the floats get too long, because then you got stuck very easily. So as a kind of rule, we need to calculate how we can calculate the length of a float. So always that we take the gauge of the machine and translate it to needles. So for a 14 gauge machine, the float can be 14 needles long. And for a 3 gauge machine, the float could be 3 needles. That makes it kind of inflexible, and it's also a nice design element which can be used and which can work out really nicely. Because a float jacquard is only knitted on one bed, so on the front bed, it's a very light garment. So if you need to save money on yarn, if you need to save money on knitting time, and if you need to save money on weight, then it's an ideal method of knitting. You also have clear color areas because the colors are nicely divided, and the other colors which are not used are just played in the back. It runs faster because also all the colors which are not used are just left out of the game. So the running time is faster. And you might know it traditionally from the Fair Isle knits, where you have these patterns which are in this sweater and go around. That is the traditional method for this and comes from here, but you can play around it with most of the items. Just like you have to be aware that for a scarf, it might not be make much sense, because with a scarf, you get easily stuck somewhere with the floats, and then they break, and this is what you don't want. But for a sweater, it's a nice way to implement colors. You can use it up to 6 colors maximum, but ideally 2, 3, 4 colors. The next one, oh yeah, this is what I said already. The disadvantage of this is, so you should take care of loose threads on the back, and only for certain designs. So if you choose your design, it needs to be a more filigrane pattern, a pattern which is kind of even and small. The next jacquard I want to introduce is the net jacquard. It's also very nice jacquard structure. it has a limited number of color. And we say up to 3 because the colors which are not used in front are placed in the back at the same time. So the motif is inverted on the reverse side. So if you have a typography, like a slogan or whatever kind of words or pattern, it will show mirrored on the other side. But the back is clean. It's a very nice surface, so it knits as a tubular, and you have a single jersey structure in front and a single jersey structure in the back. You can use it when the back matters, so especially for a scarf, because you have this twisted effect. And when you can use it when stability is more important than weight, because it's also because you knit it as a tubular, it becomes a very stable structure. So it's always a bit stiff. And it has kind of a heavy weight because you have two sides stick together. So it's a heavier garment. It uses more yarn, but it has a nice structure in the end. It's always good if number of color is limited. So if you only have 2 colors, perfect way to play around with. But you should take care of what kind of pattern you want to show, because because it's knitted as a tubular, it's 2 single layers, and the moment the color is used, it goes to the back. So then the two sides are connected to each other. Which means that if you have larger areas which are just blank, which are just one color, then you have loose areas. So in case of you use colors which are a bit different, which behave different from each other, like sometimes you use a gray, which might be a melange color, and then you use a plain color on the other side, that might not behave very nicely, and the other one shrinks more than the other half, and then you have a very strange disruption. There are possible ways to connect them, but that is again then another level of programming. You can knit something in between that holds the 2 sides together. But this is always not very nice, if you ask me, because you see it shine through, and then you use a transparent material, but that is then mostly not very sustainable. And then the third method is the twill jacquard, which is used most oftenly for a sweater or cardigan. The twill jacquard has the advantage that you can use almost every single pattern or image, and that can be converted to a knittable pattern. All unused colors is similar as the net jacquard. All unused colors run evenly in the background. So you have the color which is in the pattern runs in front, and all the other colors of your pattern creates this pattern you see here in the image on the back as an interwoven structure. So it's the ideal method to show to knit when you have a very complex pattern, or you have a very not very diverse pattern with large areas and large how do you say it? Large more unicolor areas and much noisier areas. And when the back does matter, as mostly in sweaters and cardigans, it's easy to use. It can be used with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 colors. That doesn't matter. But you need to take into account that the more colors you knit, the longer the lead time is, so the longer the knitting time is, because and that is something very important to know, Your knitting machine mostly, so the knitting machine we work with has 3 systems. That means it can carry 3 threads at one time. If you use 4 different colors, then that means the system has to go um, to the left and back again, picks the next color, and then goes back and front and back again. So the knitting time doubles up actually. So the more colors you use, the longer the knitting time. But as you remember from the color blocking, you can change color with every even row. So this is something you could apply here as well, that you use your pattern as different kind of blocks. You use a block with 3 colors, and then you add up 3 different colors. And you build it up to a very complicated pattern, and it allows you to use many different colors, but only 3 at the same time. That's the trick, which is mostly used for twill jacquard. The more colors you use at the same time, the more heavier the garment becomes and the thicker it becomes. And also in weight, this piece of this type of knitting structure use a lot of yarn because you knit everything in the back at the same time, although you're not really needing it, but you don't really need it. Yeah, the more colors, the longer the knitting time. I talked about it, yeah. Very important for the twill jacquard is also your image conversion. So if you want to place an image on top of your garment, then you can you need to convert it to the right amount of colors. When you see to the superhero image on the left, when you see it and you zoom in and you see it in detail, you see a lot of different colors. Like usually these kind of images, these RGB images are built up from a million colors or somehow some more millions. So what you see here is that every pixel almost has a different color. For us in the program, when we load this image, that would mean that every single pixel needs a different yarn code because every pixel is converted into a specific yarn color. And when you remember from the beginning, as I said, that every yarn feeder needs its own yarn color cone, then that would mean many, many cones which we cannot place on one machine. So what we need to make to realize is that we have to convert images into the amount of colors which we use as yarn codes on the machine. So you see the image on the right, the same image is converted and reduced to 3 colors. And you see in the detail that every pixel has a very identified color. So that is easy for us to load into the program and from there convert it to the knitting program. It's also not very complicated to do this. This is a simple process and a very nice way how we can use color. So the next level is Intarsia. Intarsia means that each color is transferred by a separate yarn feeder. So same as before, but in this case, we don't have any second layer. So every color is like really defined to its area, and the colors alternate directly. So there's no float, no interweaving. That is only what you see is what you get. With this technique, you have the least yarn consumption, so you only need a very low amount of yarn because you only need what you're actually knitting, and only the color which knits is used. It's also a single layer garment mostly, so it's only you can knit different techniques with Intarsia. But when we zoom in into Intarsia, it's important to understand also a couple of details. One is when we see this the square, you see that on the left side it looks different than on the right side, because how the yarn comes in and how the yarn goes out, or the loops, behaves differently. So it always, when you look at it very detailed, it looks a bit not even. So, and the finer the garment becomes, so the finer um, the finer yarn you use, the bigger the holes get. So you see very tiny holes from the transfer from one color to another. And the finer the structure is, the more effective it's on the yarn. So it might not look good on very delicate structures. Also, one important thing for Intarsia is that it needs individual programming. So it can't just, as the Jacquard structures, they can just be placed on top of your program. So it's very easy to implement the structures. But for Intarsia, this has to be programmed individually. So the programmer really needs to set the needles and activate them with the correct yarn color. And also, there is a lot of manual labor involved, since you have the threads coming out and going in and coming out for each color separately. They need to be cut off then afterwards and sewn into the garment. So it needs manual work. And this is always very important to understand. If you make very complicated intarsia structures, then it might be relevant for you that you need more programming time and more time for labor work afterwards. So what else? We have a lot of different possibilities. These were the four main structures which are most common in knitwear techniques. There is also, for example, plating. Plating means that you have two different threads in one needle, and the needle is able to turn the colors around. So you can define which color comes up and which colors goes back. The advantage of plating is that you have a single layer garment, then you don't have a very high structure, and it gives you a very nice effect, but you don't have you don't have achieved the plain color, because you always see the other color shining through. So it always gives you a little like melange effect on these colors. iCat is something similar. It's a specialty of stone machines, which is also that you tell the yarn. This is iCat is shown on the purple image. iCat is a method of how to implement color by one yarn feeder only, and it is more non-definable method of implementing colors. And a third variation is weave in, which is also possible with ADF machines. If you visit us in our MICROFACTORY in Bikini Berlin, we have ADF machines which have a special feeder for weave in. That means that any kind of material can be woven into the structure as a new layer, and can be interwoven as well in the structure, which is very nice to implement color, but also different materials. And then if you are on a very advanced level, you start to dive into knitwear structures, because what you see here on the right is actually that you can play around with knitting structures and colors at the same time. There are just endless possibilities in how to combine different structures, different float structures, or whatever into colored patterns. And again, when you visit us in Berlin, we can show you a lot of possibilities how you can play around with this. And that is always based from what you want to achieve as a designer, what you have in mind. and how advanced your knitting structure can be, because uh, different knitwear structures with different transfers and different kind of colors to combine it, that needs a lot of testing, experimenting, and also programming. So this is something you really learn when you dive into knitwear programming. And for this, it makes sense already if you start learning knitting to have this knitwear program skills in a in a very easy level that helps you creating this patterns. So, and then there's also another level, but this would mean another webinar actually, fiber and yarn dyeing techniques. Um, what you can do with yarn dyeing and coloring yarn. There's also the wall plating, where you just put two colors together and you see what's coming out in the end. You have the melange yarns, the moulinet yarns, other spin yarns, which are very nice effect yarns. So there are also endless possibilities, but maybe this is then enough to make it another webinar in the future. Yeah, and that was also it already. So the next step would be to give you a little guidance on how to make your decision in choosing color. And what you can say is that, so what we went through is the most easy way to implement color is color blocking and stripes. That is easy in programming. Almost every machine can do it. You can use different yarn colors depending on the amount of yarn feeders. But it gives, in a very simple manner, it gives you already a nice statement in your design. The second complex level is the Jacquard, what we saw, different kind of purposes. If you want a light and easy to produce garment, then you better choose the flow Jacquard. If this becomes difficult because it needs to have a kind of an consistency, then you better choose net Jacquard. And if you want to play with a very complicated pattern, then the, what was it? Twill Jacquard would be ideal. Then again, the next level and more expensive is Intarsia, which can give a very nice effect on your garment and looks very exclusive. You can use all kinds of form, but the logo doesn't need, or uh, the graphic doesn't need to be much very complicated, because oh yeah, this I forgot to mention. With Intarsia, you have the maximum of the color changes within one row is defined again by your yarn feeders. That means if you want to play um, around with a very difficult symbol or whatever, then you need to really count how many times do I change the color within one row, because you say usually a maximum of 10 or 12 is okay, and otherwise it cannot be knitted anymore, or it really depends on the number of yarn feeders. So this is something you need to ask your production company as well. And yeah, and the last advanced possibility is you play around with the texture and structure. You use variety of knitting programs, and then you can really play around combining different structures, combining different yarns, and make it a very unique knitwear piece. So this is the most advanced level, and but also fun to do. So, what's very important for knitwear is to understand structures and to also play around with it, to understand what the limitations of knitwear are, and to learn what the machine is. And what we offer at Forn are the knitwear workshops. And what's very important here, we had a participant this March, and she afterwards she said that she thought it's really important to learn with your own hands what the possibilities are. We didn't learn by watching, but trying things out for ourselves, which meant that the content really got stuck. So you really stand in next to the machines and you see how the yarn feeder works, how the system works, and what you can learn for combining programs, yarn, and the machine. And you, in the end, you will have your own garment, which comes out with your own structure, which you have built in the 2 days workshop. So you understand and apply the whole process. That's very important, because how to implement colors are only a little bit of the whole tale. So you need to understand also about yarns, about the whole process, knitting, finishing, steaming, washing. This is all shown in our workshops. And from that framework, in the end, that will give you the possibility to very much better understand how you design your garment and how you build your tech packs, that they can be easily translated by a knitwear programmer. So here we give you a little impression of the microfactory. So you see in Bikini Berlin, we have 3 ADF stall machines. We have an unraveling facility where we can test unraveling, and where we can also do, we have a research project on the circularity of knitwear. So we unravel stuff and reknit it then. We have linking machines, that the process on how we sew knitwear together. So this is linked loop by loop, as you see here. And then this is the final step with knitwear. And this is how the machine, how the yarns are threaded in the machine, and how the machine is running. So this is all shown in the 2 days workshop, that you learn really from scratch what the machine, how the machine can help you to make your designs like alive, come alive. And for all of you who are still here in the meeting, so I'm very happy that you stayed and that you are still here. So I'm very happy to offer you a special prize today for our next workshop, the Knitwear Inside Out, which will happen in May, on 21st and 22nd May. Normally that costs 490 euros, which for independent designers and also for people employed by a company, it's fully tax deductible. And today I can give you 25% of the workshop. So today you would only pay 367 euros and 50 in place of 490 euros by using the code SHIFT25. And as an additional thing today, we have developed the package Knitwear Consultancy. That is a package which usually costs 250 euros, where you get some hours with our knitwear programmer one-on-one, and you really discuss your project from scratch. So from which yarn to take, which sizes matter, what do you need to know about the knitting technique, and you go through all the positions of your design to create a tech pack which is really feasible for production. Usually this costs 250 euros, and also only for this workshop, for this webinar, we give you a special 240 euros deduction if you combine it with the Knitwear Inside Out workshop. And so you would follow the 2 days workshop and then get another 2 hours of knitwear consulting for only 500 euros in total. So that's our unique offer. It's valid only for today and until Friday evening, 10 o'clock. You use the code knit special for that offer and the code shift25 for the other offer. I will send you an email with these codes again so you don't miss it and you can still participate in the workshops if you are interested. And now I'm very happy for your questions. So please go ahead, put your microphones on and ask me anything, I would say. Or maybe if nobody dares yet, I think we had a couple of people couldn't make it for the webinar. They asked for the record, but they already had questions on how to use the color in your knitwear. So maybe Rosina, can you help me with the questions?
Yes, sure. So, first of all, thank you so much for this introduction. It was really, really exciting to hear. And the first question that we received already is, how do I test if my yarn combination works or not?
Yeah, that is a very good question actually, because yarn combinations, it's not always easy to say how a yarn behaves on your knitting machine. So if you have different kind of combinations where you want to, and a specific kind of image, what you want to achieve, what we always suggest is test your yarn and the behavior on the machine. So knit a little tiny swatch. Mostly it's enough to knit a piece by 20 by 20 centimeter with the knitting structure you want to achieve, with the where everything is inside what your design consists of. So, and then from there you can really see what behaves in what way. There's an example. We had a client where she wanted to have a twill jacquard with 4 colors. And she wanted to use cashmere because she wanted to achieve a very high quality garment. But then it turned out that the cashmere yarn is not ideal for knitting twill jacquards because it just gets so stuck in the loop that it breaks. So it's not, it needs a stronger fiber if it comes to a specific tension in the knitting structure. So this is a reason we didn't know in advance. This kind of details you need to find out by trying, and then we had to switch to another yarn.
Yeah, I see. And the second question is also related to Jacquard, actually. The question goes, can I mix Jacquard and Intarsia in the same piece?
Yes, actually, you can define all knitting pieces by different zones, which not even, as I told in advance, we always divide by horizontal areas. That is indeed right, but we can also combine different techniques vertically or however. That doesn't matter. It's a question of how I program it. But I could even program a jacquard part within an Intarsia piece or within another knitting structure. So there are like really endless combinations on how I can combine different knitting structures. Some are not possible because it has to do with transfers or with if I knit in the front or at the back. But most compositions are just a question of how good your knitwear programmer is and how far you can go in budget, let's say. Mhm.
Okay, nice. And we also have more Intarsia related questions from before. And one of them is, which machine do I need for Intarsia?
Actually, any knitting machine can do Intarsia. Most machines have special Intarsia feeders, which makes it easier for the machines because they stop in the middle and they don't run with the system all the time. Um, but usually all of the knitting machines can deal with Intarsia. Mhm.
Yeah, and you were talking before these holes when the knitting machine is knitting intarsia, and the last question was related more to these holes and how to avoid them during intarsia knitting.
Actually, you can, that's with some structure, it's almost impossible to avoid it because you always have the effect that an intarsia starts different from the kind of loop is different than how it goes out, how it fades out. So you will always see a difference between it, and to avoid these holes is mostly a question of yarn tension, so you can play around with that. Don't use very fine structures, what I said before. And yeah, this is mostly it. But there are some little details which a good programmer can use to make them look still good and nicely, but it's like it has to be carefully done.
Thank you so much for all the feedbacks. Super exciting.
So are there any other questions from you? Put your hands up, don't be shy. No?
I have a question.
Hi, Ronnie. Yeah.
Hi, hi, very nice to have this presentation, and it is really helpful when they are the product designer or launch a product. So my question is, you said there is multiple pixel design like this animating or something like that. For example, Minecraft or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this Minecraft, I think there is a lot of color, like 7 to 8 colors is there. And how does it compare with Intarsia? And how we understand this cost comparison and production feasibility?
Actually, if you count what I tried to explain before is, or if I understand it correctly, you can knit as many colors at the same time, depending on your system. So if your system consists of three different systems, so that is the whole bar which moves from in the knitting machine consists of different systems, and each system can carry one thread. So this is the baseline for a color in one row. If you want to use several colors within the same row, then it has to pick it up again and run the same row again, backwards, forwards. Is this what you mean, actually?
Yes.
So it's not really possible to do this up to unlimited amount of colors. I would say like 6 colors in a row is already a bit the maximum you can do, but you can combine different rows. And what's really fascinating is about knitwear is that the row is very small, and when you combine different rows in very small areas, that it looks already like multicolor, although it's not, you know? So you
How much
interchange your
color would be
colors.
the
I
maximum
would say
color?
6. Yeah,
6. Okay.
6 is the maximum, unless you have, because otherwise the garment gets too thick.
Mm-hmm.
So it's difficult to like, and the pattern gets very small as well. So I would advise not to use more colors than 6. Gets
And
to cost
another
intense.
And another question is, in some knitting structure, you say we saw that in the back there is some loose thread, and how can we avoid this? Changing the knitting structure or something?
Yeah,
For
it
example,
depends on the
single
knitting
jersey to
structure. And if you
single.
pick
If
up,
we change single jersey to double jersey or interlock, then it can be avoided, but thickness will be much. right?
Yeah, true. The threads. So if a color comes in and goes out again, there is a thread which needs to be cut off somewhere. You can carry this thread by um, a tuck. You can carry it to the top and then you avoid the loose threads, but you cannot do this with Intarsia because for Intarsia, that would mean that you carry something throughout your garment. You can only do that in the corner of in the edge of your garment, and then you can carry it to the end, and then you can cut it off at once. That means I have something here. I don't know if you can see it. You see that scarf, and this carries the other color to the top, and then we can cut it off so we don't have the loose threads in between.
I got it. Thank you. And previously, I get to know that there is limitation for the gauge. So especially for these flat knitting machines, we choose the heavier GSM, heavier quality of the garment. So right now, how much is the progress by stool? For example, what would be the fabric thickness, fineness?
Yeah, it depends always on the kind of yarn you choose, on the gauge of the knitting machine you choose, and these components come in the knitting structure you choose. So you cannot say in advance. The higher the number of the gauge, the higher the number, the NM of the yarn, the thinner your garment becomes. But you cannot really say in advance how thick it becomes with a specific kind of machine.
Normally, previously, I knew that it is limited to 12 gauge. After that, maybe 14 gauge. But is there any further has developed, or this is still 14 is common?
You mean gauge of the machine? So
Yeah,
we
gauge of
we
the
have an
machine.
18 gauge machine in a shift. So we have a very fine machine there as well.
That is
And
very fine.
there's even so Shimaseki, the other machine manufacturer, they have machines of 22, I think. So these are very fine machine. If it gets finer, then you come to circular knitting. So circular works with a very fine gauge, but with flatbed knitting, I think 22 is the maximum from Shimaseki, and from Stoll is 20. But you have to take into account that also, I think with the 18 gauge machine, you already have like 1,000 needles, so the knitting time increases as well. So you have long knitting times if you knit fine garment with flatbed knitting.
I got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So anybody else? Still any questions? No? So then I say thank you so much for joining me today. And I can really say it once again, cannot stop to say, if you have any ideas of what you want to hear in the next webinars, please reach out to me in an email or in a message and tell me your ideas, because we are constantly seeking new content, and I'm very happy to prepare it for the next webinar. Otherwise, there will be a next webinar in the next 6 weeks, so I will keep you updated if you signed in for the newsletter, and you will receive an email with a recording and with the offer of the workshops. And hopefully I can see you next time at the Knitwear Inside Out workshop. Would be really happy. So have a good evening.